In this video, I'm going to be giving my honest thoughts on the Marvel Super Heroes set, specifically eyeing the draft and sealed formats because those are the formats that I generally play. I often am making videos with strategical insights to help you do better in your events, but I do often get asked, hey Nikolai, what do you think of the set? And so that's what I'm going to be covering in this video. The first thing I want to say is that I am generally theme ambivalent when it comes to Universes Beyond. I don't have like this metaphysical hatred of all things Universes Beyond, and because I'm a drafter, I only have to interact with any individual IP for a little bit of time. It's not like I'm a standard player where I have to spend years playing with these cards and having these maybe jarring interactions between cards from one plane and cards from a Universes Beyond set that are like in universes versus out of universe. I don't really have to deal with that. And so from my perspective, I'm generally pretty okay when they do go to these Universes Beyond sets. I, particularly in my videos, see a lot of comments where people are like, wow, I really like this theme, so I decided to check out Magic the Gathering as a whole. And that's always something that's encouraging to me, which I think is one of the goals of Universes Beyond. And I do see a lot of comments of people saying, hey, this isn't really something I'm interested in, but I do get comments on both sides of that perspective. And so I'm not coming into this environment being like, okay, this is the Universes Beyond set, I'm predisposed towards not liking it. I'm generally the opposite. I'm just predisposed towards liking any new Magic set, and I generally approach them from that attitude of a positive vibe going in because I just like experiencing new environments, experiencing new formats, and I also like superheroes. I watched like a lot of these movies with superheroes in them, and so it's kind of fun to get to see, especially some of the top-down designs for higher rarity cards, seeing how those superheroes get played into put into Magic the Gathering. Now, on to the actual set, I will say a huge win right off the bat is the fact that these cards will be on MTG Arena. I think my opinion of the set would have been turboed right off the bat if they didn't have the cards on Arena. That was a major knock against Spider-Man, in addition to maybe the card designs themselves. But the fact that I didn't even get to play with the Spider-Man cards, I had to play with the like in-universe versions on Arena, the ones with the alternate art. I am really happy that I get to just play with the same cards. I don't have to deal with learning two different versions of the cards for when I do play in person. And that is a huge win for me. And also just from a psychological perspective, the idea that Magic is kind of like on equal footing to the point where it's like, okay, we're doing a collaboration. We get to do all of the things we would do with a normal set instead of like hitting yourself in the knees or whatever that phrase is, where it's like taking yourself out, where it's like, okay, we're collaborating, but we're doing it at a disadvantage just so we can collaborate with you. It feels so much better this way. And I'm already like, okay, I can evaluate this from neutral ground. I don't have to approach this from like a spot where it's like, okay, well, I feel like it's not going to be as cool because I don't get to actually play with the superheroes cards. Another thing I want to say is that it is so nice to be back to an environment with 10 supported archetypes. And while some of the archetypes aren't as well supported as I would like, I'll get to that a little bit later, I do love the fact that it's like, okay, this color is open, this other color is open, I can combine them into a draft deck that's going to be cool. And instead of being like, okay, there's only 5 supported archetypes, I really have to find the exact supported one so that I don't get, so I can get cards passed to me late. And like, I can't be like, okay, these 2 colors are open, but that's not a supported deck, so I can't really draft it. It's so nice to be back to a 10 archetype set, and I'm really excited about that. Another thing that I think is really great about this set compared to the previous Marvel set is that there aren't legendary creatures at common. That's a huge win. It was just like kind of a disaster, I think. And so no legendary creatures at common. Just sometimes Universes Beyond sets do this. And I think they've kind of been like, okay, that is bad. We don't want to do that. And so I'm really happy to see no legendary creatures at common. And I also think that the whole theme is fleshed out better, where they kind of definitely designed this to be a full set. So while some of the important characters like Iron Man or Captain America have like multiple cards for them, it's not like every single superhero in the set gets like 5 different cards, which is really, really nice. It's like you don't have to be like, okay, which one of that superhero are you talking about when you're just referring about random cards. And that's pretty nice as well. Getting to some of the nitty gritty on the set, how does it actually look to play? I think the 10 archetypes don't feel as distinct as some archetypes have felt in the past. And what do I mean by that? A lot of the times in this sort of like 10 2-color pair sets, there will be cards in an individual color that feel custom made for one of the 2 color pairs. Like, sure, it's a monocolored card, you could play it anywhere, but it's like, okay, this card is pretty clearly designed to go into this one deck, or it's going to be thriving in that particular home. And I feel like some of the archetypes in this set are just like overall things that aren't like super like dedicated, oh, I'm getting a huge reward for playing this card in this exact home, which is kind of a nice contrast to the way that the 5 archetype sets tend to play, where cards oftentimes fit into one specific home. This is where you want to play them because there are less supported archetypes. And so the cards definitely go into these more narrow homes a lot more frequently. And so it is kind of nice to have these more like broad overarching decks, like a green white heroes deck. Like you play heroes because there's a lot of heroes in those colors, and then there's a couple of cards that reward you for having heroes, but it's not like, okay, every card in my deck has to be a hero or I'm in trouble. It's more like, okay, I can just kind of play some heroes and get some rewards for that. Where it does struggle a little bit, I think, is when there are archetypes that don't have enough support to really like justify being called that archetype. So especially if they're going to get promoted in some of their materials for newer players, where they promote like the blue-white teamwork deck, when there's really like 4 teamwork cards total between blue and white, and only like 1 card that specifically rewards you for casting spells with teamwork. And that sort of thing, I think, can be misleading and can lead players towards a draft experience where they maybe see the 1 teamwork card in the set that rewards for playing teamwork spells in their first pack, and they're like, oh, cool, I'll build a teamwork deck. And then they don't see any cards for that deck because they just don't really exist. And then they have a like less optimal draft experience because they only draft the set a couple times. They don't know this going in, and then they try to draft a deck that just doesn't really have support when they could have just been trying to build like a blue-white Flyers deck or something like that, or just a deck that's like, okay, I have good blue cards, good white cards, I'll try to mash them together and make a cohesive plan. It's not like the sort of thing. I feel like when an archetype is too unsupported, too wide open, it can lead to some problems on that sort of front. There are a lot of decks where it's just like, okay, my blue-black deck is probably going to try to play it as a control deck. There are some rewards for like drawing 2 cards in a turn. That doesn't necessarily like bother me as much, where it's like, okay, most people kind of associate blue-black being like a control deck, that sort of thing. Black-green has like a minor graveyard theme. These sorts of things are like, okay, I can like play like these minor themes. I kind of understand these, but I do think that sometimes if the deck is too unsupported, that can be a problem. And there are also some packages of cards that like reward you for a certain thing. Like the black cards, there are some that care about like equipments randomly, and maybe that's so that they could fit into the like attacks alone deck, but I feel like that could have been like more well orchestrated. So it's like, okay, these cards go into this deck instead of being like, okay, this card cares about equipment. Clearly equipment is like a big thing in this set when there's not really that many equipment. So that's a bit of a knock against the archetypes, but a lot of them just more generally seem pretty solid to me. There's like general themes you can go for, and if the theme from the set isn't that well supported, the 2 color archetypes as a whole, like even if the blue-white teamwork deck isn't as much of a thing, like a blue-white Flyers deck seems totally reasonably supported in this sort of set and things of that nature. And I think that overall it's going to be pretty fine for as far as like the archetype support being pretty reasonable. The archetypes, even though things like maybe the attacks alone deck, a lot of the like payoffs and good cards for it are in white, and so you don't even like, why would I pair it with black other than like the multicolored black uncommon, those sorts of things. But I think overall the archetypes are going to be pretty fine, and there are some cool ones like a green blue +1/+1 counters deck. I think like the blue red artifacts deck looks like one of those ones that's relatively high synergy compared to some of the other ones, stuff like that. Getting to the mechanics of the set, they're all pretty simple. There's nothing crazy going on with the mechanics really. Power up is basically like a repeat of the exhaust mechanic we've already seen. It's an activated ability you can only use once. Sometimes you get to do it for a bit cheaper if the creature entered that turn, but it's generally going to be like a creature that's pretty solid, and then you activate its ability a little bit later, or cast it in the late game, activate its ability immediately. That's kind of nice as a flavor thing for like, oh, the superheroes, they start off as normal and then they power up, and they can only do that once because you become a superhero one time. I think that's kind of a cool thematic thing, but it's not like a crazy complicated mechanic, which I kind of like. I think simple mechanics can lead to really good gameplay, especially for newer players. Teamwork is kind of very similar to like crew stuff that we've seen in the past, or maybe saddle, which we've seen in the past. This sort of ability to tap your creatures for extra effects, it seems interesting too, where you can maybe play around some of them where it's like, hey, my opponent didn't attack with this creature they could have attacked with, maybe they have a teamwork card at instant speed, I need to think about that sort of thing. Connive is coming back. That's a cool little mechanic that just plays out pretty well every time we've seen it. It just generally does decent work. And then plans is like a new enchantment type that are kind of like, a lot of them are like natural build arounds where it's like, okay, if I can build around this card a little bit, I can get a payoff later, or just the sort of card that rewards you for enacting your game plan over the course of the game, eventually getting a reward. I think those are pretty cool as well. I'm not an expert on the flavor of all of the superheroes. I think they did a good job with the ones that I do understand, so I do kind of like that. I think that it's just kind of like a lot of them just kind of especially the higher rarity ones, like the transform ones that are one side the like secret identity, and then the other side is the superhero. I think they did a pretty good job with a lot of those, but I'm not like an expert on the lore. I just think a lot of the cards are pretty reasonable, but there aren't like any like, okay, this card is like the most of the card designs themselves are pretty straightforward to me. There's not like card designs that are like, whoa, that's a new space that I haven't thought about before, which some sets do have, but it's okay to have a little bit of a simpler set, things like that. Getting the 10 archetypes, huge win, and just having like normal cards is sometimes really nice, so you don't have to like worry about anything too complicated going on. I think my favorite design in the set He's probably Agent 13, Sharon Carter. I just like this kind of, it's a little bit slower because you have to attack with creatures by themselves to get the reward. Maybe you want to put some flyers into your deck to make it work. It just like seems like, and getting clues is like a slow way of building up card advantage. You can only like do it like once a turn because you have to attack slowly over time. It just feels like a kind of nice card. And it's funny because it's the first card in the card file. So it was like the first card I read when I was looking at the card image gallery. And I'm like, okay, this is a really cool card. And it kind of like made me like look forward to reading the rest of the card file, even though that's ended up being like my favorite card from the file. So kind of funny on that front. But I think that that's like a pretty nice design for this sort of thing. And a lot of the designs are just like, okay, this is a nice, simple design, very similar to something we've seen in the past, a little bit of a superhero spin on it. The cards, some of them play a little bit like, okay, this kind of goes well with this, that sort of thing. And there are a couple of interesting designs that are like, okay, this is like something we've seen before, but this is a little bit better or a little bit different. And I like that as well. And so overall, I would say that my opinion on this set, cautious optimism. I think it doesn't look like it's breaking any like crazy, like, okay, this is going to be like either a huge success or a huge fail. It looks like it's just kind of like middle of the road, lots of cards that are pretty solid. Most of them just feel like they fall in that moderate range of design where it's similar to stuff we've seen in the past with a little bit of a difference. A lot of the archetypes feel that way as well. Like, okay, this is something we've seen these colors do before. There's nothing like too wild going on. And so overall, pretty excited for a 10 archetype set. Looking forward to seeing how these cards play out, but I'm not expecting anything too crazy on either end of the extremes, but I am looking forward to seeing and finding out myself. That's going to do it for this video, though. I hope you enjoyed hearing my perspective, and I will talk to you next time.